You just barely escaped the bombs and have started entering your designated vault, expecting safety, only to realize that the vault doors never fully closed and the radiation is slowly but surely killing you from the inside. This is just one of the 122 or so vaults used for experimentation by Vault-Tec, and today, we'll be going over 9 of Fallout's most evil vaults to see just what life was like for the people inside, with Vault 11 being the scariest experiment done yet. But first, we have to start with Vault 75 was a vault advertised as a safe place for children going to school. It was told to have enough space for all the students and their families to move in, and because of that, it was built underneath Malden Middle School. As soon as the bombs fell, every member was able to enter the vault in time. But this is where things take a turn for the worse. If you were anything above the age of 18, you were separated from your children to join orientation, where you would then immediately get executed. That's because this vault's sick experiment was to refine human genetics, locking the children into the atrium as lab rats. If you were one of those orphans, you would then be indoctrinated and raised to be strong enough to venture to Uptop Land, which is the name they created for the wasteland. In a day-to-day manner, you would wake up to brutal physical training, combat drills, and endless propaganda. You lived a completely isolated life similar to cults, learning to follow the overseer's orders without question, while scientists watched you from above like livestock, thinking that one day you'll be sent up to Uptop Land to venture and help the suffering people of the wasteland after graduation. In reality, this graduation is your evaluation date. As soon as you turn 18, you would be tested physically and intellectually. The top performers had their genetic materials harvested, and only those with the highest intellect were recruited into the research team as lab assistants or as guards. The rest? Well, in the eyes of the Overseer, there would be no point in keeping bad genes alive, and many such as yourself would be swiftly executed after your graduation party. On the surface, Vault 106 seemed great. People were registered in on time, no executions took place, and there were no apparent experiments happening. That was until 10 days after the vault's closing. Just barely a week after, you and your friends may start noticing unusual odors and a faint, strange taste in the air. But the Overseer assured everyone that everything was fine, just slight issues with the vault's filtration system. Nothing to worry about. And besides, with the bombs having just dropped, all that stress and random headaches were probably just signs of PTSD. But then, the headaches got worse. The random voices started, and horrifying hallucinations filled the corridors, making it impossible to tell what's real from what's not. In reality, Vault 106's experiments were on human behaviors when secretly introduced to psychoactive drugs. These hallucinogens were pumped directly into the air vents, known only to the Overseer and his staff. And as weeks went by, that daily life turned from a normal routine into paranoia and madness. When the residents finally lost their minds and turned violent, the Overseer tried to initiate a lockdown to save himself. But by then, it was already too late. These vault dwellers, having lost their minds ages ago, overwhelmed security, killing everyone, including the Overseer. Fast forward 200 years, and that gas is still running, leaving behind a vault full of mindless, violent survivors, forever trapped in an endless nightmare they can never escape from. Not much is known about Vault 68 and 69, but from what we can assume, life inside would probably have been brutal and tribal. In Vault 68, a single woman had to survive in a closed environment where factions of men fought for control over this singular person. Meanwhile, in Vault 69, that sole male would have probably have been stripped of his humanity, reduced to a biological commodity under constant surveillance and control. In both cases, what might first seem as a dream come true can quickly turn into a life of solitude, being treated as a product to be won or bargained with. Vault 4 was actually the poster child of Vault-Tec, one that many such as yourself would have seen through ads during the pre-war era. It advertised itself as forward thinking, even conducting a trial run where scientists and up to 80 volunteers lived in the vault for 5 years. But it's safe to say that these volunteers were not so willing to be the subjects of its true purpose. See, Vault 4 was run by scientists from the Hawthorne Medical Organization, and their goal was to create radio-resistant human hybrids capable of repopulating the surface. In a day-to-day sense, life for these volunteers quickly turned into horror as they were subjected to genetic splicing and radioactive exposure, which would have blended their human DNA with mutated creatures. We get to see some of these mutations with the current residents of the vault, but their biggest, most evil result was the Gulper. The Gulper is a human-monster hybrid featuring human-like eyes and fingers for teeth. They're born from a human mother who is then immediately eaten alive by said Gophers. Once they ran out of fresh volunteers, they ended up looking for wasteland survivors to lure in to use as test subjects, which is how Lucy and Maximus eventually find Vault 4. But after many years of forced torture, the suffering these volunteers endured reached a boiling point. The subjects revolted, killing the scientists who experimented on them, and turned Vault 4 into a safe haven for mutants and refugees alike. But the legacies of the horrors done to them remains etched into their very being. In the Fallout universe, most standard vaults made by Vault-Tec were designed to accommodate approximately 1,000 people, but really this was only for advertisements. As we've seen with the previous vaults, this isn't always true, and it certainly is far from it in 77. Imagine being the only person in the vault, your only memory of people being the ones that put you in here. Vault 77 was an experiment to see just what isolation does to a person, especially when their only form of social interaction is a crate of puppets. For the first few months, you'd probably just enjoy the endless food and safety you have. But as soon as that heavy silence sets in, with zero form of entertainment to distract you, the mind will desperately crave for attention, and eventually, you'll even start to hear voices not your own. This is what happened to the Puppet Man, a person who endured over a year of isolation before finally opening that crate of puppets. Desperate for any interaction, he slipped the Vault Boy puppet into his hands. But as the isolation deepened, he began projecting different personalities onto these different puppets, building an imaginary society to replace the one that he lost. The Vault Boy puppet, however, became something sinister, something much closer to his state of mind. It started whispering to him that the other puppets were plotting against him, even driving him to murder them just to quiet the noise in his head. Eventually, the Puppet Man escaped into the wasteland, who would then slaughter an entire camp of slavers, leaving behind his terrifying name. If musical talent is something you have pride in, then fear not. Vault 92 was made with the intent of preserving the world's greatest musical talents. Life in this vault would have been great. With swarms of instruments and an abundance of musicians, day to day would have never have been the same. That is, until you hear that noise. It's not loud, but whenever it's quiet, you hear it. Like a hum of an AC unit, it's constantly running in the background. You try to ignore it and focus on your rehearsals, but that noise never stops. Before long, that faint hum starts making you feel weirdly on edge, making you snap at any small irritation. Unlike Vault 106, where there was no endgame except the observation of long-term hallucinogenics, Vault 92 was made with a secret purpose: to create super soldiers. They called it the White Noise Mind Suggestion Combat, a program that, unbeknownst to Professor Malleus, the scientist in charge of the project, exposed all the vault residents to the sound in their sleep. This noise silently programmed them with the intention that certain commands and orders would then be able to control these people. This subliminal frequency constantly toyed with your brain. Day in and day out, it implanted violent suggestions directly into your subconscious. It now dawns on you that the only reason you were ever picked is because of your sensitivity to noise frequencies. This experiment, like so many others initiated by Vault-Tec, ultimately failed. The white noise eventually caused the subjects to go insane, experiencing mental instability and a heightened sense of aggression that led to the death of everybody else in that vault. Vault 18 was the classic rich versus poor setup. If the vault had been fully completed, you would have entered a cramped second wing while 10 ultra-rich vault dwellers had an entire lavish hotel suite to themselves. The plan was to experiment on the reactions of two different groups of varying living conditions to see just what would happen. Now, in this hypothetical world, I'm sure many atrocities would have been done by the ultra-rich, causing the working population to revolt. But that's not what actually happened. See, once the funding for the lavish wing was completed, Ezra Parker, the key financer of the vault, simply pulled the plug, coming up with endless excuses to never have the cramped second wing be built. If you were one of these ultra rich, then life would have been lavish, because not only did you have an entire vault to yourselves, with robot butlers doing your every bidding, you also outlived life itself by voluntarily using RoboBrain technology to become living cyborgs. That's right. To avoid the apocalypse, you and your billionaire friends willingly scooped up your brains into glass jars. That is, until the sheer absurdity of high society culminates in a literal murder. It basically turns into a post-apocalyptic version of Knives Out. If you've watched the recent Fallout series, you already know that Vault-Tec's evil wasn't just limited to isolated underground vaults. Sometimes it spans across massive, interconnected networks, which is where Vault 31, 32, and 33 come in. Vault 32 and 33 were great. They became healthy communities that traded supplies and occasionally arranged cross-vault marriages to keep their gene pools diverse. It seemed like a true post-apocalyptic utopia. But from a top-down perspective, the reality was that this system was just a horrific corporate breeding program. The entire system was orchestrated by Vault 31, which wasn't a thriving community at all. Instead, it was a massive cryogenic storage facility housing Vault-Tec's most loyal junior executives, a group known as Buds Buds. The twisted experiment here was about corporate monopoly. Vault-Tec realized that the best way to win capitalism was to outlive the competition. The residents of Vault 32 and 33 were essentially just livestock, carefully curated to produce obedient passive workers. To ensure absolute control, the overseers for Vault 32 and 33 were always secret agents that came from Vault 31, manipulating the elections and maintaining the illusion of a true democracy. The residents lived their entire lives believing they were preparing to reclaim the surface, completely unaware that their marriage, their children, and their futures were just items on a Vault-Tec spreadsheet. Welcome to Vault 11. Imagine stepping into what you think is a standard vault, only to be greeted by a horrifying announcement. The citizens of this vault must sacrifice one person or everybody inside would be killed instantly. At first, you and your other residents are horrified, but fear is a powerful motivator, and eventually, you start participating. To survive, you form political campaigns, trading favors and betraying friends just to ensure that your name isn't on that ballot. Year after year, you watch as neighbors one by one march into the sacrificial chamber, knowing that them dying is what is keeping the lights on right now. Decades pass, and that democratic voting process turns into a nightmare. Eventually, a civil war breaks out over the elections, slaughtering almost everyone until you and your 4 friends are the only ones left standing. Beaten, broken, and completely out of options, the 5 of you finally decide to defy the mainframe. You refuse to send another person to their death, fully expecting the automated system to execute you all. But the execution never comes. Instead, a pre-recorded message plays, congratulating you for your commitment to human life and unlocking the vault doors. The sacrifices were never necessary. It was just the test of your morality. The crushing weight of realizing that generations of murder were entirely optional broke the final survivors. 4 of them formed a suicide pact right there in the atrium, leaving only one lone wanderer walking out, carrying the guilt. Vault-Tec may have been the grand villain pulling the strings, but the true horror of their experiments is that they were carried out by real people. Vault 11 and all the other vaults devolved into nightmares because the residents reacted realistically to impossible situations. And sometimes, when you push human nature to its limit, it can be scarier than any other creature in the wasteland. But Vault-Tec isn't the only megacorporation turning human lives into a nightmare. If you want to see the dystopian future of Cyberpunk, click the video right here, where we compare reality and Night City to figure out just how close we truly are.